Welcome to AIW Empowers interview series. I'm so happy to welcome our guest, Sheila Sapp, with me today. How are you, Sheila?
I am doing great. The weather is beautiful outside. It's the fall time of the year, and I couldn't be any pleased and happier.
Oh, that's wonderful. So let's jump right into your journey. Can you describe the work that you do today?
What I'm doing today is working as an educational consultant. I started my business about maybe it's going on 4 years now ago. I also have written some resource books for parents. And right now I have been putting together videos. I call them quick tips, where I have ideas for parents that I'll post on my YouTube channel. So I started a YouTube channel, and I also post little instructional games or activities that I share. And the whole idea is I am really big on parents being their child's first teacher. So I do as many things as possible to encourage them. And also, I love being a guest on podcasts. And I am currently in the process of starting some research for another resource book, which is a follow-up to my book, which was recently published in August, Raising Readers at Home. So that's what I'm all about right now.
You sound really busy, and we'll dive into it, but you're retired, and so it really does not sound like retirement. It's a second career. But before we jump into that, let's jump backwards to the start of your career. Can you discuss how you got started years ago and how it brought you to where you are now?
To be honest with you, I probably would say I really started when I was young. I was the type of child who did not want to miss school. I would go to school, I would come home and play school. I'm the oldest of 6 siblings, so either they were my students, and of course I was the teacher, or I played with my dolls. So I was always interested in teaching. And from there, when I was in high school, I was fortunate enough to get a summer job and work as a teacher's aide. So I spent several summers doing that. And I just love being around children and teaching and working with other people. And consequently, I graduated from high school and I received a scholarship to attend a college, Glassboro State, which is now Rowan University in New Jersey, and I became an education major. I started out being an elementary major, and that's where you work with the older students, but I decided kindergarten primary was where I wanted to be. So I did that. I graduated and was able to get a job in the school system that I went through as a student. So yes, that was a blessing in itself. And it was really interesting to visit the high school and see some of the teachers that I had as a high school student. And now to look back and to be a teacher and to have the opportunity to have my dream come through, where I was actually working with children and having my own class. And I started out as a first grade teacher at an elementary school in East Camden. And it was a K through 8 school. And I was one of 2 first grade teachers. And so it was just a great experience. And as a result of that year in working with those first graders, I've always been an avid reader, And I just never understood why some children didn't like to read. So based on my experience with those first graders, I decided that I wanted to get a degree in reading. I wanted to become a reading specialist. So I went back to school and I worked on my master's in reading to be a reading specialist for 2 years. And in 73, I graduated as a reading specialist. I completed the program and I was able to get a job as a reading teacher in an elementary school. And I did that for about, I'm trying to think how long, maybe about 5 or 6 years. And then I moved to another city, Lawnside, and was able to work in a different position, but I was at the elementary level and I also worked with middle school. So I've done quite a few different things, and those experiences led me to be interested in working as a instructional supervisor. And when I moved to Georgia, I was fortunate enough to get a position that led to becoming an instructional supervisor. So now I work with teachers, parents, and students. And I've realized in doing that, that I developed an interest in being a leader, maybe being a principal one day. But what I decided to do was to start off as an assistant principal. And where I worked, there were not assistant principals at the elementary level because I knew I did not want to work at the middle school or high school level. And some years passed, and I lived in Glenn County and Camden County, which I currently live in now, they built a new elementary school, and they were looking for assistant principals to work part-time. And I found out about that, and I decided this is my chance. This is my opportunity to work at the elementary level and to see if this is something that I really wanted to do. I was hired and I worked as an assistant principal in administration half of the day, and the other half of the day, I was the arts and craft teacher. So that brought in another interest of mine. I didn't mention when I went to college, because of my interest in art, I took some courses in art and fell in love with it. And my art instructor said, you really should be an art major. And I really considered switching and becoming an art teacher instead of a kindergarten primary teacher. When I went back and looked into it, I would have had to take quite a few courses over and add to my program. And I didn't have the time. So I always told myself, I'll go back one day and get a degree in art. So with this being a assistant principal part-time, I was able to combine my love of art with my interest in being an administrator just to see what it would be like. And I enjoyed it. And I was new. The principal that year was new. So we really stuck together. And he did such an excellent job in opening that new school because, everybody was new. And they decided to open up another school. It was a middle school. And they decided to move him to the middle school to open that school up. So here I was, my first year, new school system, new as an assistant principal. And what does he do but recommend me to be his replacement?
Wow.
I, I mean, I was very nervous because I was new, as I said, to the system, and I was really learning their curriculum and so forth. And I prayed about it, and I said, "Okay, I'll do it. You go ahead and recommend me." Well, even though I said that, a part of me was like, well, I hope they don't really go with his recommendation because I don't know if I'm really ready. Well, the board meeting, they met, and the following week, I was the new principal. And so that was the start of my journey as a principal. And I did that. I became principal of the school, and I was there in that position for 3 years. And then I decided that, and at that time, I had some change personally in my life, and I decided that I need to step away. And, it was a time where things were unsettled for me personally, and I need to back off and take care of my personal life. And then meanwhile, a new superintendent came in, and I was moved to a position as a curriculum director. So I did that. And I enjoyed that because I was able to tie in my reading background, and I still was able to work with teachers. I worked with parents, and I also had the opportunity to work with other principals. So that opened up a different of skills for me. And I did that for a number of years. And one of the principals, who was my colleague, decided to take a job in North Carolina. And I received a phone call from the superintendent saying that he wanted to see me. And here I'm in this curriculum position. It was my third year. And by my third year, I knew, what reports were due. I had built relationships with a lot of people at the state level. I had attended conferences, and I was all geared up and ready for that fourth year in that role as a curriculum director. And so I had no idea when he asked to meet with me what he was going to ask. I mean, my mind was on the curriculum. And I thought, now, was there a report that I forgot to turn in? Or did I not do something correctly? And when I sat down, I went to his office. And of course, I asked him if I could pray before we met. And so he allowed me to do that, which I did. And I walked into his office and I sat down, and he was smiling. And he said, well, I have a favor to ask you. And I said, okay, what is it? I want you to go back to Crooked River as the principal. I nearly fell out of my seat. And I said, what? Now, mind you, I had been there and some years had passed, and I just didn't see that for my future at that time. And I named 3 people that could take the job instead of me, because I just wanted to stay in what I was doing. And every person that I named, he said no to. And I said, well, can I think about it? He said, oh, sure. You go home, you think about it, and call me back. So I went home and I thought about it. And I mean, I was so nervous that I remember going in, unlocking my door, and my hands were just shaking. And I walked into my room, in my bedroom, and I fell on my knees and I prayed. And I just had a feeling that came over me that it was going to be all right. And so I called him, I went back, I called him, and I said I would do it. But one of the things that he promised me is that he wanted me to go there, and he couldn't tell me how long I would be there, but he would bring me back as a curriculum director when he found a replacement for me. So I said, okay. And one of the things that I did say to myself is that I was going to go there, and my faculty and staff would never know how I was feeling, and that I would go there with an open heart, an open mind, and that I would do the best that I could do. And I want to tell you that I went there, and when I started that school year less than a week before school started. I had to get ready for pre-planning. And of course, I worked with the assistant principal there, and we got together. I mean, everything just fell in place. And I just knew that that was where God wanted me to be at that time and that season in my life. And I was there, and that was my second time there. And I stayed there, I think, for maybe about 5 or 6 years. And then a position opened up back at central office in curriculum. And the superintendent was true to his word. And so I went back. I became the pre-K director. I implemented that program. I was the test coordinator for the school district, and had a lot of different experiences. And I did that for a number of years, and then decided that I wanted to go back into the principalship. And so I was able to go back, and I was at a different school in the school system. And then I was there for a year. This school was in the town where I currently moved to, where I currently live, Woodbine. And that year, it was a different year for me, but it also felt like home because I lived in the community, and I would tutor the children after school, and I would make home visits, and it was like everybody knew my name. I mean, it was like coming home. And I thought that that's where I would stay. The superintendent moved me back to Crooked River, and this is a different superintendent now, moved me back to Crooked River. And I definitely, here I was again, going back, and I wanted to stay at the school where I was. I had to pray about it, and I went there with the same mindset and attitude that I had when I went back to Crooked River. And I must say, this would be my third time back. So, and there were some teachers there who were still there, who worked with me when I was there the first time, the second time, and now the third time. And I'm happy to say that each time I grew as a person and as an administrator. And that last time there, I was at Crooked River. See, I went back during the 2001 school year, and I stayed there until I retired June 15th of 2017. So, and we became recognized as a school of excellence that year I went back. And I honestly say that those last years at Crooked River was the most rewarding and blessed time that I had as a school administrator. I learned so much and I grew so much. And I know I had one teacher say, you know, you're not like you were when you were there like the first time and the second time. And it was happy to see that and to hear that, because I knew that I had evolved and grew and became better, not only as a person, but as an administrator. And one of the things that I miss being there is my contact with the children. I love the children, and they kept me energized and motivated. And my mornings were spent greeting them, welcoming them to start the school day and to have a good day, talking with them at lunchtime, and then being there at dismissal, saying goodbye. I just got a joy out of remembering birthdays and recognizing returnees and greeting new students and acknowledging haircuts and hairdos and new outfits. And the parents were outstanding. I can honestly say that the majority of my contacts with parents were positive, and you always have a few challenges, but they were far and in between. So, and I thank God for that. So, so now, and you mentioned about, that I'm retired. So I will say I'm retired, but I am not tired. I feel still a need to stay connected, to do things for children, to help parents, to help students, and school leaders. And I've branched out where I've been able to write and participate in book anthologies. The first one that I did, I co-authored. I was one of 32 authors, Live Your Faith Out Loud, and I wrote a piece for that. The second book anthology that I participated in is 90 Women of Prayers, and it consists of 90 prayers. So I was one of 90 authors. So I had the opportunity to write a prayer. And another book anthology, which has not been published yet, I not only wrote a prayer, but I wrote the foreword for the book. So I am excited about that. I have never written the foreword for a book. So I'm looking forward to that coming out soon. So that's where my journey has brought me. And of course, with the business, the challenges with technology, and I know you're probably going to talk to me about that, and with social media. So that's where I am today.
That's really an incredible career. And with such a vibrant career, how did you manage through retirement when you finally made that decision? And how did you go about finding yourself after retirement? Because, I think it's pretty well known, retirement can be a big change in most people's lives, and it's not always the easiest to go through.
Well, one of the things, I don't know if you have picked up my love for children and for learning. And I must say, retiring was a hard decision for me. It took me 5 years to finally say, this is it. And I remember asking people, well, when do you know it's time for you to retire? And they told me, you will know. And I did pray about it. And one morning I woke up and I sat up in bed and I said, this is it. I can no longer do this. I need to do something else. And things were changing. I was older and my body was telling me, you need to be doing something different. And, sometimes, up here, you're thinking, you feel and you think that you can keep up the same routine and schedule. But after a while, your body says, no, you need to do things a little differently. And I remember when I told my husband, this is it. He said, now I've heard you say that for 5 years. I'll believe it when I see it. But I do want to tell you that once I made that decision and I did get my paperwork in and everything fell in place. And I trusted that God would help me with that next step. And retirement is different. And you get, like, for instance, one of the things that I had to adjust to is like just signing up for insurance. I was so used to checking, I'm going, yes, I don't have any changes. I would get my cards, everything would be taken care of. And I didn't have to worry about it. I got my new card and so forth. Well, I didn't know that now that I was separating from the school system, it was on me that I had to put forth the effort to seek insurance. But luckily, because I was a Georgia retiree, I was able to apply for another insurance company under their plan. And so it was some things like that. And also getting used to not having to be someplace at a certain time, that schedule, that routine. I found myself thinking when I would get up in the mornings after I retired, did I forget something? Or is there someplace I need to be? So that was another adjustment. And then my life, everything revolved around my job, like making doctor's appointments and shopping and going to the grocery store. I always centered everything around my work schedule. So I had to adjust to that being different. And so it was strange. I felt strange, like, why aren't there any people here? Before I realized, all right, Sheila, you're in the grocery store and it's early in the morning. Or you can sign up for early morning doctor's appointments now. You don't have to wait until later today or go so early so that you can get back and not miss a lot of work time. So that was different. And also be that that everyday contact that I told you that I miss with the children. So that was something to get used to. And then realizing that I was going to have to go back and revisit and look at Sheila again, because there were many things that I had put on the back burner. Like, I've always wanted to write a book. I've always wanted to do consulting and have some sort of business dealing with parents and children and educators. Fortunately, I had started a book. I was able to get a book proposal. And my last day at work, I submitted my manuscript for my book, Staying the Course, which talked about my journey as an elementary school administrator. Now, I had written another book some years ago, and that was a collection of different activities for reading and math readiness. And I wrote that in 2003. So I hadn't written anything from 2003 up until almost the time of my retirement. And of course, the landscape had changed. There's social media, these apps, Facebook. I was not on Facebook. I told my teachers, be careful about Facebook, because you don't want to put yourself in a position where you post something or your friends post something on your page. Because we did have a teacher lose her job because of a posting on Facebook. So I pretty much stayed away from Facebook. So all of that I learned, I did by trial and error. YouTube became my resource, as well as my daughter, who got so tired of me asking questions. And she was the one who said, look, you need to go on YouTube, and because you need to learn how to do some of these things yourself. So that's what I did. When I was working, I was big on technology for my staff. But in my role as an administrator, I really didn't have a lot of time to put into it to learn as much as I should. And I had a media specialist that was out of sight. For me to tell her, oh, I want such and such, such and such, and she would do it. Now I look back on that and wish that I had spent more time, but I have learned, and I am still learning. So that's one of the challenges. The other challenge is you go on Facebook and you see people like podcasters and other consultants and coaches, and you see what they're doing. So I had to focus on not comparing myself with them and not letting my journey be their journey, or not accepting the growth that I had. And the other thing is looking at numbers. I was bad about, oh, I posted such and such, and I only had 3 people look at it. And that used to bother me. And I realized that I couldn't let numbers drive me, that I had to continue to stay sincere and true to what I want to do, regardless of whether one person looked at it or 100 people watched it. So now that's something that I still work with. I still work on not comparing myself. The other thing is persevering, because there are times when things are slow. And I want to share with you, I think in an earlier interview, I talked about how on Mother's Day 2 years ago, I was having dinner and I bit down on a piece of chicken and broke a tooth. Not just any tooth, but a tooth that was next to my front tooth. So I looked like a jack-o'-lantern. Now, and I had in my mind, I was going to be guest speaker on all these podcasts. So you can imagine how I felt when you're 6 or you're 5 and you lose a tooth in the front. It's cute. Not when you're a mature adult. Luckily, I was wearing a mask because it was during COVID time. So that saved me. And I had the implant surgery, got an infection. So it was 2 years before I was able to have that tooth replaced.
Wow.
So I am happy today that is in place and I can be a podcast guest. So that was another thing that I had to adjust to, another challenge. And I found that I like podcasting. I tried it several times, and that's another thing that I want to get into. I love talking to students, and I love speaking to women, especially women who maybe had some challenges and think because of mistakes that they made when they were younger that they can't follow their dreams or have goals. And I have things that I can share with them to let them know that it is never too late to start a career. And just because you make a mistake, it does not mean that you can't pick yourself up and continue and grow and still have a purpose and be able to help someone else with their journey. And so that's where I see where I am right now. I'm still growing and still learning, and I haven't given up.
I think that's wonderful. And when you do put that podcast into place, I hope that you share it with me so that I can share it with everyone from this community, because I think it would be very valuable to anyone who has kids or is wanting to go in the same direction that you've taken. Now, you've mentioned some challenges that you've had since retirement with social media and perhaps comparing yourself with others who are maybe further along in their learning about social media and how to implement it. If you think about earlier on in your career, can you think of any challenges you had back then?
Earlier in my career, I would say one challenge that I had is, as you can tell, I had mentioned that I am an avid reader and a learner. And for me to do the different jobs and the positions that I have had required going to school and getting a degree. And I would say, and I did mention that I have a daughter, and I would say that one of the sacrifices that I made is that I went to school. So that time in school was time away from my daughter. After she was born, I did stay home for a year with her, and I was able to have my sister-in-law stay with me. So I didn't have to take her out. But when I went back to work, I did miss that time with her, although I did work with her, during when I was home and on weekends. I did those things. And I had mentioned earlier about my personal life. I became a single parent during my first year as principal at Crooked River Elementary School. It was devastating. It was the darkest period in my personal life and professional life. But when I look back on it, if I had not made those sacrifices that I did to go to school, to get that master's specialist degree, and I did, and of course my daughter was grown at this time, but I did go on and get a doctorate in supervision and curriculum. If I had not furthered my education, then I would not have been able to send my daughter to college and be able to pay for her degree and run two households, because after her second year, she lived in an apartment. So, and all of those expenses that go along with having a child in college, I paid. And so I am grateful, ever grateful and thankful for that. But it is a sacrifice that I had to make. And so that's something that when I look back, I have some regret, but I know that if it hadn't happened for me that way, then my journey and story probably would have been a little different. And so I don't regret the choice that I made. And my daughter currently lives outside of Atlanta and has worked at the college level and has a PhD in English. And I am just so proud of her accomplishments. And I just know that she will continue to go on and do great and even greater things than I have done.
I'm happy that you said that. I think it's very fascinating that she has followed in your footsteps in a way, and so you've had those sacrifices and maybe some regret, but to me it shows that you've been a role model for her, and she's seen you being empowered and has gone forward in some of the same way.
And one of the things I want to add about being a role model, life can throw you curves. And one of the things that I wanted her to see and gain from me is that when you are thrown a curve, that's the time that you need to pray and ask for strength and pick up the pieces and continue. It may be different. It may not be the way you wanted it to be, And I never thought when I started out in New Jersey as a first year teacher in Camden, New Jersey, that I would end up in Georgia, that I would be a principal, that I would although I always had an interest in writing books, that I would be an author and that I would be able to be a guest speaker on a podcast and share my journey with other people. That never entered my mind. And I could have taken what happened to me, that unexpected divorce, and not use that to grow, because I had a choice. I could have been bitter or better, and I chose to be better. So I looked at those areas that I needed to grow in, and I'm still working on them because I feel that there's always room to grow. And as a result of me actively doing the work, then I was able to go on with God's help and have a different journey and a different story for my life.
Thank you for sharing that. I think the way that you've expressed how you not just necessarily go around the challenges, but maybe through them, is pretty inspirational.
Mm-hmm.
Along the same lines, do you feel that you have a weakness that has perhaps impacted your career, either in a positive or in a negative way, when you look back?
When I look back, I think one of the weaknesses that I have is that I had very low self-esteem. And I know the origin of it. Part of it came from what I experienced as a young child. I grew up in a neighborhood that everyone on our street, everyone looked like me. The surrounding neighborhoods consisted of Italians, people of Polish descent. We had some Jewish people. So I was always exposed to other cultures, and I heard other languages. And my mother decided that she wanted us to go to a school that was not in our neighborhood. So I went to a school that was out of my neighborhood and was in a different school attendance zone. And in that school attendance zone, there were very few Black or African American children. And so I started my years off being the only Black child in my class. And I remember in first grade and in second grade being asked, why my skin was dark, or why my lips were thick, and why my hair was different, why my hair felt funny. And for me as a young child, not being able to answer those questions and not really seeing a lot of people like me at school, I began to think that something was wrong with me, the way I looked. And I know it was then that I began not to like who I was. And I kind of stayed to myself. And one recess time, I was approached by a student that was in my class, and her name was Karen. And recess time was a lonely time for me because I kind of stayed to myself, because when I was approached, I was always asked questions, and I just didn't want to be asked questions. No one came up and asked me to play with them, they wanted to ask questions about how I look. This day, Karen came up to me, and I remember watching her coming over to me and smiling, and she asked me to play with her. And that was like a surprise and different for me. And we became friends, and we played together. We lived in different neighborhoods. I did get to visit her. I got to meet her mother and her brother. Her brother was 5 years older than her. And she was my first friend. And it was because of my experience with Karen that I learned that some people like you and not concerned, and they're not concerned about what you look like, your skin color. So that was an important lesson for me to learn, because I had begun to not like other people of the Caucasian race, because I didn't feel good about myself. They didn't make me feel good about who I was. But I felt good with Karen. And she never asked me any questions, and she accepted me for who I was. And we were in the same classroom, the remainder of second grade, third grade, and in fourth grade. And one day we had a bad snowstorm, and it was shortly before Thanksgiving. And Karen and her brother, we didn't have school that day. They were on a train trestle taking a shortcut to an A&P store, which is most like Acme, or it was Acme. That was the name of the store. But it's like your typical grocery store. And he had walked off of the trestle. And I don't know, but for some reason, she didn't hear the whistle. And he went back up on the train trestle to grab her. And they were running off, but they didn't make it. And they were both hit by the train. And they died later that day in the hospital. So she was 9 and he was 14. And that was my first experience with death. And she stays with me. And it's her kindness that was one of the things that I wanted to share with children in my role as a teacher and a principal. And I did have the opportunity to do that. And I even wrote a story. Karen's favorite snack was sliced apples covered with sugar and brown cinnamon. And so I titled my story that, and I self-published it almost 2 years ago now. And it's on Amazon. And I call it the Karen, well, her name was Warziniak, Karen Warziniak. And I had the opportunity to visit her gravesite this summer. I never knew where it was. And that was one of the things that I wanted to find. And I want to tell you that I was able to find the gravesite and the location of her grave. And remember, I told you I lived in New Jersey. I lived in Laurel Springs, New Jersey. Her gravesite was 1.5 miles from where I used to live in New Jersey. Nothing but God. And I thought about her off and on and never knew that I was that close to her gravesite. And so I planned to write a follow-up. I took a picture of the gravesite and I planned to write a follow-up on that. So I had some closure. And that was another, I didn't mention it earlier, but that was another reason why I became a teacher, because I wanted boys and girls, regardless of their race, their religion, that I wanted them to see people for what they have inside, to get to know people and not judge people by the outside.
That's really special. Thank you so much for sharing that with me and with the audience. If I can ask, in those moments in your career where you felt maybe like you had a lower self-esteem that day, or you needed that little bit more, did you find yourself going back to those days with Karen and how she made you feel?
What I found was, well, I always thought about Karen off and on, but what I realized was the decision that I made, the choice that I made for my first marriage. I made that choice out of not choosing wisely, out of need, out of thinking that no one else would want me. And so that's why I made that choice. Because I felt that, I really wasn't that pretty. And what are the chances that someone else would be interested in me? And that's another thing that I want to share with young women, that you need to love yourself and accept yourself the way you are and who you are and how God made you. And I'm finding that it is helping me even now be more confident and be more accepting of who I am. I'm a kind person, and sometimes I will do more than what other people do. But I have to realize that's Sheila, and I can't expect Sheila, everyone to be like Sheila. So I have to accept people for the way they are and who they are. And if they show me the type of person that they are, and it's not someone that I really need to continue to have a relationship with, then I don't need to hang on and think that I can't have another friend or be friends with other people. So it's accepting yourself and honoring yourself, and just knowing that part of loving yourself and part of the self-esteem is having that confidence and believing in who you are and respecting who you are and taking care of that person. Because even though I'm an adult, little Sheila is still in me. Mm-hmm. She's still a part of me. And I am so thankful and grateful that what I'm doing now, in a sense, that I am embracing little Sheila. Little Sheila made it. And she was and is a remarkable person, and she continues to be so.
That's wonderful advice. I think it's something that, and it can be a day-to-day thing for some people, you kind of, the next day you have to remind yourself perhaps, and then maybe next time in this next week, but that, it's always there, and taking care of your child self is right. Really important.
And you really have to take each day and live to its fullest, because as you said, and I'm sitting here now today, I'm enjoying this session. Who knows what's going to happen 2 hours later or tomorrow? Something may happen, but I have today that I can look back on. And and I didn't mention this, I keep a prayer journal. And that's something else that helps me, because I will pray and I'll make note of it. And then I go back. And when that prayer is answered, then I'll say, God did it. And so I have a journal that I can look back on and remind me of God did it that time. You were going through this. And what's happening today? He will do it again. So yes, it can be, and it should be every day.
Mhm. And so switching gears a little bit into what you do now, which is the many things you do now. How do you create motivation for yourself on the days where you're just not into it? You're just not ready to take on the day. Do you have any specific things that you may do to get your motivation where you need it to be?
One of the things that I do, and I didn't bring it in here to share with you, to show you, I have like a little tablet, and the title on the outside of the tablet is I am grateful. Every day when I get up, I write something down that I'm grateful for. That helps me start the day off in a positive mood. That helps motivate me, because I'll look at, sometimes I'll write, I'm grateful that I got a letter from my daughter yesterday, or I'm grateful that I received a phone call from a certain person, or I'm grateful that I prayed for someone. And so I do that to motivate me, because there are times when I get up and it's like, I don't know if I feel like that, but that helps me. And I mentioned to you that I have some squirrels that I feed. And every day, I have to laugh because they're very smart. I go out and I put corn out for them, and I'll stand there and watch them. So they bring joy. And from time to time, I'll see a butterfly, or I'll stand out and I'll look up at the sky, at the clouds, and just soak in my environment and what's going on around me. Something else that I can use to motivate me is, I remember some years ago going into a bookstore and saying, I want to be able to see some of my books on a shelf one day. Well, I have some books that are mine, and I have a bookshelf. And now I can look at that bookshelf and I see some books. So it's like things that I had hoped for. And when you see the manifestation of them, and you have other things that you want to continue to do and to try, that's motivating also. And I really enjoy motivating other people, because I find when I encourage and motivate someone else, it motivates me. Because I say, okay, Sheila, now what did you tell Miss Carlika? Or what did you tell your daughter, Nikki? So it comes right back on me. So those are some of the little things that I do to motivate myself.
Those are great. They're like little reminders, right? Like,
Mhm.
so I mean, you've had like I mentioned, a varied career, and you're in a similar field, but you've taken it to like different levels, let's say. Looking back, and you can pick one part of your career or what you're doing now, I'll leave it up to you. But if someone were to say, Sheila, I'm interested in doing what you do, what would you recommend as the best educational preparation to get them there?
Depending on what they want to do, like for instance, if they're interested in being a teacher, then I would volunteer and try to seek those experiences that would give you an idea whether or not that's actually what you want to do. Maybe help at a Sunday school class, or I worked as a teacher's aide, volunteer to tutor someone, could be a younger or work with a younger sibling, and find out as much as you can about that profession. What do you need to do? And if you're interested in being a teacher, what colleges or universities are available? Look at their programs. What area or what interests do you have? Do you want to be a middle school teacher or elementary teacher, or do you want to work at the high school level? Are you interested in working at the college level? Something else that you want to look at is that profession that you choose, because as you grow, you want to be able to try other avenues. So what other avenues would teaching lead you to? Would it lead to coaching or advertising, or maybe working for a newspaper, or being a journalist, or being a newscaster, or work on a radio station? So explore other areas. And that's one of the things that I didn't do early on that I would recommend that other people do, to see how you can branch out. Because with teaching, you could work at a hospital. You could work with a senior citizen center. There are just so many different avenues that can branch off off of that area. So that's what I would recommend that they do.
And along with, the preparation and things they
The
should.
preparation and finding other people who are in the field, meeting with them, if you can, with teaching, of course, you have your practice teaching and so forth, but depending on what you want to do, there might be internships, and even doing something for free, substituting, just so you gain the experience. If you're that interested, money will not matter. For example, right now, I call myself an educational consultant. I have the YouTube channel. I'm interested in podcasting. I'm interested in developing courses. I'm interested in doing seminars. Now, if you ask me, well, Sheila, have you been making money as a consultant, as a coach, as a mentor, as a presenter? And I will tell you, no, I have not. I have sold some books, but it's not about the money for me. My why is I'm in it because I'm all about people. I'm all about encouraging. I've had a profession. I'm retired now. Money is not my main interest. So you need to look at what your why is, because sometimes, I mean, if you're all about the money and I want to be in Fortune, 500 person, then you need to realize that, maybe that might happen, but it may not happen right away.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do in the meantime? And are you committed enough to it that you're going to stick with it regardless? I'm still doing the YouTube videos. I have a book proposal that I'm starting to work on, another book proposal. I just happened, I brought this here. This is my vision board. And on it, of course, I want to abide in Christ, but I have down that I want to speak at a women's conference. I want to come up with a children's book, which I have not published yet. I have a story, but it hasn't been published yet. I want to write a devotional. I want to write a devotional one day. And I have a picture here of me standing, and you see all these heads. And so one day I see myself standing before an audience, sharing my story, sharing something that's going to encourage people. And I also have down that I want to visit the Grand Canyon. So that's another picture. But write down or come up with a vision board, write down your goals, and have something that you want to work toward. Mm-hmm. And even if you don't accomplish everything, at least on that journey, I know there's going to be something that you will accomplish. And that's something else that'll keep you motivated too.
Mm-hmm. That's very, very good advice. And I think the vision board is really cool. It's something tangible you can look at. So you have that base. So along with the advice to give to someone, to other people perhaps interested, when you look at yourself, if you were able to talk to the Sheila starting off in her career, what do you wish you had known? What advice would you have for Sheila starting out?
For Sheila starting out, I would say, girl, you need to get out of your head. You need to accept who you are, what you are, and you can do it. And the other thing that I would say is, God made you the way He wants and wanted you to be. And beauty has nothing to do with what's on the outside. It's what's inside. And you have what you need. And you need to take advantage of what you already have, what you've already been equipped with, and you need to use it. That's what I would say to Sheila. And let me add this. I would also say to Sheila, you shouldn't have taken so long to retire. That there were other things that you could have done too.
I think two very good pieces of advice for I think a lot of people to take in, both at the start of the career and towards the end. To sometimes just bite the bullet, right? Mm-hmm. That there's more chapters. Going into your day-to-day now, because you have these different endeavors, can you describe to us what a typical day or work week is like for you?
Well, a typical day for me is when I get up, I thank the Lord for another day. I have devotionals and I'll do that. And I told you I have my little I Am Grateful book. I do exercises, YouTube. So I have, I'm a member of the Silver Sneakers group. So I do exercises via TV or I walk. And the other thing that I do is I told you I feed my squirrels and I post prayers. I post I post prayers on YouTube. I'm not YouTube, on my Facebook channel. I do that every day. Facebook page. I said channel. I meant to say page. I also find gospel songs or Christian songs that I can put on my Facebook page. I have some messages that I send to certain people. Then after that, depending on if it's time for me to do a video, I will do a video. And like, for instance, I am made up for the podcast. So when we're finished, since I have makeup on, then I will do a video and I will do something to promote an idea, a quick tip for a parent or homeschooler or teacher or principal, and I will post it on my YouTube. I like wearing makeup. I don't like taking it off. That's a job. So, and I have some stories that I have started that I need to go back and work on. So that's another thing that I do. And then sometimes I read. I love reading, especially autobiographies. I read Viola Davis's book. I'm now reading Kerry Washington's book. I've read Where the Crawdads Sing. And so I recently joined a book club. But I have books. When I go to the store, I buy books. So I have books all over. And some I haven't read yet. So I will read. And I used to knit and crochet. So I had to kind of get back into that. And I used to sew, especially when my daughter was younger. I made all of her clothes for school. And after a while, they get to the age where they don't want homemade clothes. So those are some of the things that I do. I really am enjoying this time. It seems like the days go by so fast. And I will also spend leisurely time outside, just as I said, just soaking in and outside and enjoying the day and spending time being still. Now, that's one of the things that I find that I really have to work on is being still. And that means sitting and not having all of this going on and really being still and listening. My journey right now is listening to hear of God's voice. And so that's what I'm working on now.
Those are really full week, it sounds like. And there's learning curves to some of these things as well, that it's also a day-to-day. And you mentioned some of your books earlier. I would love if you could tell us a little bit about your latest book that got published in August.
The Leader book. see, I have several. I don't know, can you see this?
Just a little bit closer and perhaps closer to your face. Yes, wonderful. Staying the course.
There it is. As I told you,
Yeah.
I'm still learning. This chronicles my experiences as an elementary principal. And remember, I told you that I was at the same school 3 different times. So it's Sheila in the first early years, Sheila in the middle years, and Sheila in the latter years. And in this, I talk about the lessons that I learned. And the lessons that I learned came mainly from the messes. I have a chapter where I talk about the messes. It's easy to be a leader when everything is going fine. No discipline problems, no teacher problems, no parent problems. It's a good day in the neighborhood. Now, the challenge comes when things don't happen like that. And that's where you grow. And so I have a chapter on that. And I have a chapter where I talk about those qualities that are needed in being a leader. You know, you need to be empathetic. You need to be sincere. Your staff and teachers need to know that they can trust you. And you need to be forgiving because you are going to make mistakes and you want them to forgive you. So you need to forgive them when they make mistakes. And I talk about empathy, sympathy as a trait or a quality to have. Then I also talk about those teachers that I would say they're a little challenging. You have the drama queens, you have the people that complain all the time. And of course, you have those who you like want to clone. They're positive, they're go-getters, and so forth. But as an administrator, you have to know and learn how to work with the different quality and types of teachers that you have. And you learn for the negative Nellies, that there's certain times of the day that you want to kind of go the other way. Like early in the morning, you come in and it's like, good morning. And they want to overload you with negative things and so forth. So you don't start your day off like that. And then I give tips on some things that they need to consider doing. I remember in starting out that after a long day, I would be on my way out the door and that phone would ring. Staff is gone. And I would pick up the phone. And 9 times out of 10, it would be an angry parent, or if not angry, it would be a situation that I couldn't solve anyway. In most cases, the teacher was gone, or it could be an incident where I would need to get back to them because I would need to do some research. Or it may have been something that happened on the bus. I didn't ride the school buses every day. So rather than end my day on a negative note, or be frustrated, I learned, okay, Sheila, there's nothing wrong with you have your key in your hand and you're on your way out. Just proceed and go out. Tomorrow is another day. And if it's real important, they will call you in the morning. And 9 times out of 10, I would be greeted either with by a teacher who had something happen, and they would tell me, which would prepare me for the phone call that I was going to get later. Or that parent would show up, and then I would take the time to meet with them. And so that's one of the things that I encourage them to do. And the other thing that I encourage them to do is to develop a thick skin. Everybody has a bad day. And sometimes, out of frustration, teachers will fly off and say something to you. And sometimes they'll say hurtful things. But you need to realize that you cannot walk around as an administrator and carry your feelings on your sleeve or on your shoulders. If so, you'll be crying or have your feelings hurt every day by a teacher, a parent, and sometimes children can say some things too that hurt, and as well as say things that hurt other students. So that was another thing. So I really enjoyed writing this. And that chapter where I talk about the messes is called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And I was just thinking, I didn't know if I should share a little anecdote, but, well, let me just tell you this real short thing. I had a bus situation where I had a parent call me, and on the bus, this little girl who was a 3rd grader and was sitting next to a kindergartner pulled her pants down and showed her backside to the kindergartner. And when I called the kindergartner, at first it was like, did this really happen on the bus? And I called the student in and I talked with her, and she said, and she's a 3rd grader, I was just trying to show her what moon meant. She said, my mom told me that when she was in high school, she mooned somebody. So I was trying to show the kindergartner what that meant. So, of course, that ended up with a parent conference, but I put that in there. It was funny, but it wasn't, sometimes you have to, after the fact, laugh at some of these things. Mm-hmm. I just put a little note that parents need to be careful about what they share with their children. But I just wanted to mention that was a little fun thing that I thought was funny that they would get a kick out of. But I did have a book signing, and I did have some administrators purchase that book. And I mentioned that I had so many different experiences in my 3 different years at Crooked River and my year as a principal at Woodbine Elementary, and also just in general, that I would be an excellent coach or mentor, or just somebody, like if you wanted to get something off your chest. That was the other thing that I mentioned about, I recommended that they have a mentor, and I recommended that it not be someone from their school system, and it be someone that they trust, because sometimes you just need to get things off of your chest and you don't necessarily want an answer. And then sometimes you do want to throw an idea out and get feedback. So I live in Georgia and I can be that person. So whether it be as a leader or as a parent or a young woman who feels like she's ready to make a change in her life and would like to have someone to talk to that has experienced failures and come back from them, I'm the girl. I'm the one.
And we will be sharing how to contact you in the show notes. Everyone can look for that in there. And as well as links to your book and all those things. Sheila, I want to thank you so much for joining me today and providing us with all this really enriching information. But before I let you go, I would love to give you the floor. And if you could share with us any advice that you would have for someone who's decided to start on this path in the education field.
What I would advise someone starting, whether they are thinking about retirement or just wanting to change their life and start over again and take a different path, I would advise them to do it one day at a time, one step at a time, and to know that there are going to be challenges, and also to know that Rome was not built in a day, and to celebrate every accomplishment. Sometimes we do things and we don't celebrate and we don't appreciate those hoops that we've gone through, those challenges that we faced, and the changes that we have made. And I would say it's never too late, regardless of your age. I've had a career and I'm starting something different. And I'm still learning. There are still things, as they already see, that I, even as a presenter or a guest speaker, that I need more practice with. And look at mistakes as ways to improve, ways to grow. You learn from your mistakes. And the other thing that I would advise them to do is to be open and be willing to step out and be uncomfortable, be nervous, be fearful. Do it anyway, even if you have to do it scared. So that's what my advice would be.
Thank you so much, Sheila.